It's a question that I'm asked all the time. What do I post when I'm not booking? I think the other question that can probably go right along with that is what do I post when I can't share my work? Two different voice actors, possibly at two different stages of their career, but both struggling with the similar problem, not being sure what to post. Well, by the time we get to this end of this episode, I'm going to give you 6 concrete ideas that you can start using right now, this week. Even if you haven't booked a single job in your career, even if you're under NDAs for every single job that you've ever booked, you're going to have posting strategies. The struggle is real here. Maybe you are in a position where you're a newer voice actor and you really haven't booked a whole lot yet, so you don't have a lot to share. Or I've talked to voice actors who are seasoned veteran voice actors, but maybe you work in the gaming or the animation space and you're under NDAs and the game hasn't come out yet. And so you can't talk about all the different things that you're doing because you're waiting for all of these different games to come out, which can be incredibly frustrating in the meantime because you're trying to figure out where to post. Maybe you're like me. I work in the e-learning space. And so a lot of the work that I do is proprietary content. It cannot be shared. And so I don't always have samples of my work that I can post, which means I don't always have that type of content that I can lean into. So much of the stuff that I do is internal, it's behind closed doors. It's for companies that don't want it splashed all over the internet. It's this age-old story. We've all been there. We've all had to tell this story at some point. Somebody asks you, "What do you do for a living?" And you say, "Oh, well, I'm a voice actor." And they say, "Well, that's really cool that you're a voice actor. What have I heard you on? Is there anything that I could think of or anything that I would know that you've been on before?" And then I get to say something to the effect of, "Well, unless you're a sales rep for this particular Fortune 500 cybersecurity company and you happen to be watching the new sales training videos, then you probably haven't actually heard me." Look, we can't all be famous cartoon voice actors, but the problem is still the same. The struggle is still the same. We want to have content that we can share on our social media. And we think that we should be sharing content of the projects that we're working on so that we can add social proof that we can actually do this thing of voiceover that we say that we can do. But for one reason or another, whether we don't have those jobs or we can't share those jobs or we're under NDA for those jobs, we can't post. This is where we need to get outside of the traditional voiceover box. And we need to get past the notion that if we're going to use social media as a marketing tool, which we should all be using social media as a marketing tool for our business, we have to be posting about voiceover all the time. We don't. We don't. And actually, we shouldn't. We should not be posting about voiceover all the time because it's interesting, but it's not that interesting. It's not the content that is really going to move the needle with our audience. And so for me, despite the fact that I don't have a lot of work samples to share, very rarely do I have work samples to share. I still have plenty of content for all of my different social media channels. I managed to leverage all of those different platforms to be able to keep myself front and center with my leads, my prospects, my clients, to establish relationships, to help them to not forget about me. I can use these platforms and continue to use these platforms as a tool for finding new leads, for nurturing relationships with prospects that I'm trying to get the opportunity to work with, and for staying top of mind with those clients who I am already working with. And in fact, I would go so far as to say that if the only thing that you ever did was post your bookings, it would probably actually hurt your social media marketing efforts more than it would help your social media marketing efforts. And that's what this episode is all about. It's about trying to get you past that limiting belief that you've given yourself that if I don't have work, I don't have anything to share. So here's a few things that I want you to consider. If you only ever posted when you were busy, then that might actually result in a really inconsistent posting strategy. Unless you're a top booking talent who's booking, multiple jobs a day or multiple jobs a week, in which case, by all means, keep going, keep doing what you're doing. But if you only ever posted the work when you are booking and you're not booking consistently, then you're not using social media consistently. At the same time, if you only ever posted work when you're booking, you run the risk of developing the dreaded salesy association, and nobody wants to have that association. In fact, it's one of the reasons why we're all afraid of marketing, because we don't want to come across as salesy. Well, if all you're ever talking about is that thing that you specifically do and showing off that thing that you specifically do, that's where you're going to run the risk of being salesy. And if you're sitting here thinking, well, so and so is always posting about the job that they just booked, and you've got a particular voice actor in mind, something else that you want to remember is that social media is often a highlight reel. Yes, you are seeing wins, people are sharing wins, but you're not seeing the 97 auditions that they submitted prior to that that they didn't book before they got to that win. If you are only ever posting your bookings, how is that helping you connect with your audience in an authentic way? Sure, you're a voice actor, I'm a voice actor, we're all voice actors, but there is so much more to you. There is so much more to me than just what happens in the booth. And you should be letting them see all the sides of you, all the sides of your business, all the sides of your personality. One of the rules of sales and marketing is that we do business with people that we know, like, and trust. One of the ways that you can give people the opportunity to know, like, and trust you is to let them see you. Now, I know there are a lot of people who think that social media isn't as effective. I know there are marketing coaches in our industry who talk about the fact that social media isn't effective. Uh, I can only speak from my experience, and it does work for me. And I do see the conversions, and people do talk about some of the things that I share. And so I want to give you practical advice. That's what this podcast is all about, right? Actionable, practical advice from my own career, my own business, in how to make this work. Algorithms reward people who show up consistently with good content. The more content that you create and the more engagement that you are able to generate with that content, the more reach the algorithms are going to give you. And this is pretty much universal, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, whatever, doesn't matter. The algorithms reward engagement. The algorithms reward the creators who can keep people on the platform longer. And this is something else that is very key. If people are only watching the first couple seconds of your video and moving on, then you're not creating the kind of engagement that you want. And you're not creating the kind of engagement that the algorithms are looking for. And so they're not going to reward you. So we want to always be thinking about thinking strategically about the content that we create. We also have to be thinking about the fact that if we just show up once in a blue moon and that's our posting strategy, just whenever an idea hits us or whenever we feel like it, but there's no real consistency, no real schedule to it, you're likely going to find it much more challenging to build an audience on social media. And in fact, I would be willing to bet that there are at least a few of you that are watching or listening to this episode right now, and you're nodding your head because that's your problem. You feel like social media isn't working for you. And so you're not using it as much as you should be, which then ultimately creates this self-fulfilling prophecy where if you're not using it as much as you should be, it's going to continue to not work for you. So then you're going to continue to feel like it's not working, which is going to make you want to use it less and less, right? And this is a vicious circle that we need to break. So the question then becomes, if I'm not posting about my voiceover work, what the heck am I posting, Marc? Give me ideas, Marc. I need actual ideas. Well, I promised you that by the time we got to the end of this episode, you were going to have 6 different ideas that you could lean into. And so that's what I'm going to give you. So here are a few different themes that I want you to think about. The first theme is, here's what I'm working on behind the scenes. Look, what we do is cool. Now, maybe you're still new enough in the industry, or maybe you're just connected enough to the industry that you feel that it's cool. Sometimes when you've been doing it for a while, it doesn't really feel very cool anymore. But to outsiders who are looking in, what we do is really cool. Even if you're just doing corporate videos, not doing big name animation or, AAA video games or whatever, it's still kind of cool. And for a lot of people, it's kind of mysterious. They don't really understand it. They don't really know what is going on. They don't really get the whole concept, the whole process of voiceover. And so behind the scenes content gives them an opportunity to see the wizard, as it were. And so I think there's a really fun opportunity to lean into that. When it's done properly, it can definitely have broad appeal. It can generate plenty of engagement. And remember, engagement drives algorithms. Write that down, stick it on a post-it note, put it in your booth. Engagement drives algorithms. So what can we do to get people behind the scenes? What kind of content that can we create that shows them what's going on behind the scenes? Well, maybe you can show them your studio or your booth. Maybe you can do a walkthrough of your recording space. And here's something fun. You're going to assume, some of you are going to assume that you've got to have a whisper room or a studio bricks in order to be able to give them a walkthrough behind the scenes. But you know what might be just as fascinating for people? Knowing that you recorded that big shot national commercial in your walk-in closet. That's a pretty interesting behind the scenes take that's probably going to blow some minds and create a really interesting piece of content. So maybe you do that walkthrough of your recording space. Maybe you can show off some of your equipment, talk about the different equipment that you're using. If you've got that fancy Neumann or the 416 or whatever it is, maybe you've got a whole rack full of preamps and all kinds of fancy stuff, or a big mixing board, or maybe you're just using a Rodecaster and it's got a bunch of blinky lights and you want to show that off, whatever it is. But maybe showing off some of your equipment can give people a behind the scenes look. And I think even that, same as we just, the example with the studio bricks, there are voice actors who are recording and making bank with their U87s plugged into their Apollos, and there are just as many voice actors who are making money with a more basic Rode mic plugged into a Rodecaster, and we're all doing the same thing. We're all producing great audio, and it all sounds good, and that can be a really enlightening, fascinating behind the scenes look. Maybe you could do some behind the scenes content of doing auditions, except you want to be very careful about doing actual auditions here. In fact, I would advise against doing actual auditions. You might get yourself into trouble with terms of use for casting sites or potentially NDAs or things of that nature. But there's no reason why you couldn't come up with some practice scripts, have ChatGPT write some for you, and then you could go into the booth and quote unquote audition and give people the opportunity to peek behind the curtain, see how you mark up a script, how you interpret a script, how you decide where you're going to put emphasis, what's going to get mentioned, what's going to get a little bit more of a drive behind it, whatever it is, all of those things. Again, it's a peek behind the curtain. You can make day in the life content. You know, a lot of people don't understand what it is that we do all day. Some people think that we literally just stand in front of a microphone all day, but that's actually not the reality of what many of us do all day, every day. If you've got strong routines and habits, then you could take that angle. It could be very educational, very informative, teaching people some of those best practices that you have for crossing things off your to-do list and making sure that you're getting things done. But on the flip side of that, if you're naturally funny, you could just as easily make content that's a lot more lighthearted and entertaining of, here's what people think that I do all day in my booth, but here's what I actually do while you're sitting on the couch eating popcorn, watching Netflix, whatever it is. The idea here, though, of this one is giving people that behind the scenes peek at what is going on in the life of a voice actor. Number two is marketing moves that I made this week. How are you hustling? What are the things that you are doing to move the needle on your business? If there's one thing that I have learned from a decade of coaching more voice actors than I could even possibly count, it's that a lot of us have the same questions. A lot of us are thinking about the same things. And so if you're thinking about a particular question or a subject, chances are a few others are too. And so sharing the things that you're doing to find leads, to build a following, to come up with ideas, to make contacts, to maintain relationships, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is really relevant to a very broad audience because it's the same stuff that we're all thinking about day in and day out. And it's not like you're giving away secrets or you're giving away the farm on this one. You're just sharing insights into the moves that you made this week. And that is content that, even though you may be talking about how you're doing it from a voiceover perspective, it can be just as relevant to the video producer who's out there hustling and trying to find new clients and new prospects to create videos for. Take this a step further by sharing something that you actually did or that you are trying or something that you plan on trying to do, and then ask folks what their big move was this week. When you ask that question, you're giving people a reason to engage. And what did we say earlier? Engagement drives algorithms. But here's the other side of this. When they respond, Not only did you create that engagement, which we really, really want, but you're also getting to learn what other people are doing and potentially turn some of those things into ideas that you can use yourself. So that's number 2 on the list, marketing moves that I made this week. Number 3 on the list, which could be in a similar vein, is a lesson I learned this week. I have said so many times that the vast majority of the content that I create and post on social media is actually me talking to myself. I just know that other people are going to benefit from it. So when you see one of the pieces of content that I've shared on Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever, and you felt like you've been called out, or you felt like I've gained insight into your soul, or you feel like I'm talking to you individually, the reality is that post was probably made by me for me as a reminder to myself to do the thing. And I just knew that other people were going to ultimately benefit from it. So it could be something that you learned from a podcast. I'm a huge podcast listener. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review wherever you are enjoying this podcast right now. It could be something that you learned from a newsletter. I subscribe to lots of newsletters for a lot of different types of content so that I can learn a lot of different things. I'm an avid reader. I'm always learning things from the books that I'm reading. Huge nonfiction and biography guy. I want to learn from the people who have been there and done that in business and entrepreneurship and sales and marketing. A lot of social media accounts that I follow across multiple platforms so that I'm always learning things. And so those are all options for where you can learn. For me, I'll be honest, a lot of the stuff that I share for the lessons that I've learned have been a direct result of my own failed attempts and the mistakes that I've made and how I've been able to correct those things. And so when I am sharing that, we'll call it educational content, which by the way, LinkedIn loves educational content. This is one of the changes that they've recently made to the algorithm. But when I'm sharing that educational content, there are two things that are happening. One, I am reinforcing my own learning. The more that I talk about those things, the concepts, the practices, the strategies, the tactics that I'm picking up from the books and the podcasts and the newsletters, et cetera, the more that I talk about them, the more that I reinforce them for myself, the more that I internalize that learning. And then also, I really do believe that when I share this stuff, it's going to be of benefit to others. You are a voice actor and you are learning things that are helping you in voiceover, but you are also a VOpreneur. You're a business owner, a small business owner. You have this entrepreneurial spirit to you. You are working from home. You are maybe balancing two different jobs. Maybe you are a working parent and trying to figure out how all of that works. And those lessons that you learn along the way absolutely have relevance. So, what did you learn this week? Where did you learn it from? How did it impact you? Share that story. So, that's number 3, a lesson I learned this week. Number 4 is to shout out to a creative. One of the easiest ways to expand your network and your overall reach on social media is by including other people in the content that you're sharing and tagging them. And so, when you tag someone, in theory, at least a portion of their network or their followers are going to see that post as well. This was one of the ways that I ultimately have been growing the podcast. Every time I have a guest on the show, I would get them to share it because if it's just me doing the episode, I can share the episode and I can get that in front of my audience. But if it's me with a guest on the episode, I will share it to my audience, tag them, they will share it to their audience, they share it to their audience and tag me, and it expands the reach. And this is part of the way that the social media platforms and the algorithms work. And so there is actual logic and strategy to this type of a post where you're shouting out a creative. So think about how you can expand your network by mentioning other creatives. So maybe you had a really awesome experience working with a particular producer or a particular client on a job, and you want to share the story of that experience. And so you ultimately share that story and tag them in a post. Or maybe you're collaborating with your clients on a really cool project and you want to talk about that project and share that collaboration story and you tag them in the post. Or maybe you had a really amazing session with a coach or a mentor or something that you learned from your accountability group or your mastermind group or whatever it is. And so you want to talk about that thing and you want to share and tag the people who shared that with you. So you tag the coach or you tag the other members of your accountability group or whatever, and that can ultimately expand the potential reach of the post, which is obviously always a good thing. So whatever it is that you are going to do, look for ways to share a little love for the people who are making an impact on your business and enjoy the extra added benefit of the extra reach that you are going to get when you drop that tag. It can also be a really great way to shine a light on the cool people that you're working with and the cool people who are speaking into your business and influencing you and influencing what you do as a voice actor and as VOpreneur. So that's number 4. Shout out to a creative. Number 5 on the list is throwback wins. So what started off this episode was this argument that I don't have any jobs that I can share, and so I don't really have anything that I can talk about. Well, maybe you've got old jobs that you can revisit. When you don't have a new job, you dig into the portfolio and you look for the ones that you've worked on in the past. Tell the story of how you finally landed that big gig or dream client. Talk about the first agent that signed you and what that process looked like. It's even better if you can include some behind the scenes tips or tricks or advice. What did you include in the email that got you through the door initially with that client? Or what did you do? How did you approach that audition differently that ultimately is what booked you the job? Or how did you get connected with the agent? Maybe it was through a workshop that you got connected with the agent in the first place, and you can tell the story of how that happened. So, throw back to those old wins and the lessons that you've learned from those and the lessons that you can share from those while you're waiting for that next project to come along that you can post on social media. And finally, number 6 on the list, because I said I was going to give you 6. And by the way, this is not the end. So don't just get to number 6 and then be like, okay, episode over. I've got more tips to share. Number 6 for content, though, is real talk moments. Business can be hard. And I think we've all experienced that. Working from home is not always easy. My kids come walking in when I'm in the middle of sessions, when I'm in the middle of coaching, when I'm in the middle of, some of those deep work moments when I'm really, really focused, and Kaylee will come in and pull me out of it for a minute, which, by the way, I do not regret whatsoever. Working a day job and then coming home and trying to pursue voiceover in the evening, that can be exhausting. Being self-employed is risky, right? That we don't always have the luxury of a consistent and steady paycheck to lean into. At the same time, being your own boss can be one of the greatest gifts in the world. It has honestly been one of the best things that has ever happened to me. And I would also say that, working as a voice actor, making a living as a voice actor, that's a pretty cool way to make a living. Share those stories. I said earlier that we do business with people that we know, like, and trust. And we can use social media as a tool to help people to get to know us, to like us, and to trust us. And we share those real life moments, those straight talk moments, those fireside chat moments, as I sometimes like to refer to them. What is more genuine and authentic than that? What is more relatable than that? And when we share our stories, it encourages other people to share their stories. And if they share their stories on our story through comments, we've created engagement. And say it with me, algorithms love engagement. So those are 6 different things that you can lean into. And like I said, don't leave me yet. I've got more for you. Number 1 on the list, here is what I'm working on behind the scenes. Number 2 on the list, the marketing moves that I made this week. Number 3 on the list, a lesson that I learned this week. Number 4, shout out to a creative. Make sure that you tag them and expand the reach of your network. Number 5, when you don't have a new win, throw back to an old win. Dig into the portfolio, pull a story from your past. And number 6 are those real talk moments. So you've got some ideas now of what you can write about. Let's talk about a few best practices for while you are doing this. We already know that these platforms are built for engagement. I've said it a dozen times in this episode. LinkedIn in particular loves engagement. So make sure that when you're posting, you're giving people a reason to engage. Now, one of the things that you don't want to do is directly ask for comments. What I mean by that is like, don't specifically type the words, leave a comment below. Um, a lot of the algorithms will recognize that and they will potentially punish that. But can you pose a question? So when you've shared one of those throwback wins from a really cool project that you got to work on and you told the story of how that happened, you finished that post by saying, "Tell me about a time that you landed a really cool booking and what you did to land it." And so you're encouraging people to engage. You're giving them a reason to engage. You're letting them know that you want them to engage. And as a follow up to that, reply to comments. As people start to comment and the algorithm starts to push out your post a little bit more because of the fact that you've created engagement, make sure that you are taking the time to reply to comments. I always try to reply to as many comments as I can, particularly on LinkedIn and YouTube, because I know that those things can absolutely drive algorithms. Choose your medium wisely. If I tell you to do video and you tell me to take a flying leap, because you are never going to do video, then probably signing up for a new TikTok account is not going to be the smartest move for you. So you have to choose your medium because that's going to influence the platform that you ultimately choose. Is it going to be text? Is it going to be images? Is it going to be video? Is it going to be a combination of all of those things? Will you create one piece of content and repurpose that piece into multiple mediums for different platforms? That's the A plus scenario, by the way. When you create one video that becomes a piece of video content, but then you take an excerpt from that video and maybe you create it into a graphic and that becomes image based content. And then you take a summary of the thoughts that you shared in that video and you turn them into a text post, which would work perfect on threads, can work on LinkedIn as well, right? So that would be the ultimate goal, by the way, is to take one piece of content, repurpose it into multiple pieces of content across multiple mediums. But either way, you have to decide what works for you. Maybe you're a writer and you love to write and you're not really into video, and that's fine. Write and focus on platforms where text based content works really well. So make sure that you are choosing your medium because it's going to help you choose where you're going to ultimately post. Identify your audience. And this is really important because you need to always be creating content with your audience in mind. How is this content going to add value to your audience? How is it going to help them, inform them, inspire them, entertain them? Your social media may be about you, but it is ultimately for your audience. And so you always need to keep your audience in mind when you're creating content. You need to be thinking about who you're trying to target and what kind of content will speak specifically to them. And this is one of the reasons why I think we need to get outside of the traditional voiceover box. If all you're ever doing is talking about the voiceover projects that you're working on, there's a very high probability that you are going to attract a very large audience of other voice actors. And that doesn't necessarily serve your purpose, unless you're a coach or a demo producer, I suppose. But if you're ultimately trying to build a network of instructional designers who are going to hire you for e learning, then you need to take that into consideration and post content that is going to speak to instructional designers on some level. And that does not mean, to be clear, that you need to become a subject matter expert on instructional design. But let's say that you are doing some behind the scenes posts. That was one of the themes that we came up with. How can you do a behind the scenes post of what it looks like when you're in the booth recording e learning? How can you do a behind the scenes post that shares some of the quick editing tips that you have for when you're editing long form audio like e learning? These are posts that would potentially speak to instructional designers, especially if they've ever tried recording their own audio. And so always be thinking about your audience and what is the content that is going to speak to your audience. Another tip is to always have a strong hook. Do you read every post in your LinkedIn feed? Probably not. Do you watch every video as you are scrolling through Instagram or TikTok? Probably not. Do you read every post in your X feed or your Threads feed? Probably not. Do you watch the first 3 seconds of a video and decide whether or not you're going to swipe away? Probably. Do you read the first sentence of posts on some of these other platforms and decide at that point whether you're going to continue or swipe away? It's probably how you do it. That's why you have to have a hook. Sometimes the first sentence is the only sentence of your post that they're going to read, because if that first sentence isn't interesting or compelling or surprising or entertaining or humorous or whatever it is, then they may decide to move on to the next piece of content that is in their feed. So you always need to be thinking about, how do I hook them? How do I immediately make them want to keep reading or keep watching by delivering something great in the first 3 seconds? That's having a strong hook. And don't forget your branding. I stick a logo on nearly every image that I post on social media, even if it's just a small little logo in the corner of that image. I want people to recognize my brand, and I want people to build associations to my brand. I once had a voice actor reach out to me and tell me that they knew when my videos were being suggested in their YouTube feed simply because of the colors that were used in the thumbnail. That's strong brand association. So always be thinking about things like your logo, your fonts, your colors, the design style that you choose. When I go into Canva, I have certain elements that I use over and over and over again. I use the same fonts. I use the same colors. I use many of the same backgrounds. I use the same branding and logo, because I want people to start to develop that association so that before they even read the piece or really look at it, the colors or the fonts alone, and they immediately associate, oh, Mark Scott, oh, VOpreneur. And so always be thinking about that as well. Working on a brand kit can be a really smart idea for social media, so that you have certain design templates that you can use over and over and over again that start to build brand recognition. The bottom line in all of this is the same as it always is with me. And that is simply this: stop overthinking and just do the thing. I'm going to say that one more time. Stop overthinking and just do the thing. You are more interesting than you give yourself credit for. And I know that there is more to you as a person and a VOpreneur than just the latest project that you worked on. Give yourself permission to get outside of the voiceover box in the way that you have traditionally thought about it. And if you can't give yourself that permission, I just did. So take that permission from me. You've got 6 great ideas here to get you started. This is my challenge to you to wrap this episode. Take one of those ideas and commit to posting one new piece of content in the next week. Let that one piece of content be the first piece of content, but don't start thinking a month ahead, 6 weeks ahead, a quarter ahead. Let's just get the first piece of content done. Because once you get the first piece of content done and you realize it wasn't as hard as you thought, or it wasn't as bad as you thought, maybe you actually get some engagement, maybe a couple people comment, whatever, that can be the thing that starts to snowball and build the momentum that will get you to the second piece and the third piece and the 27th piece. But let's start with the first piece. That's my challenge. Take one of these 6 ideas that you've got in this episode and use that to post one piece of content in the next week. Stop overthinking and just do the thing.